The sound of that tractor means it's time for us to get to work. Welcome to the Give Us the Dirt podcast powered by Hoopah Grading Company. My name is Brandon Lindsay, and I am your host. So today we've got a special guest with us, and he's traveled all the way from Maine to give us the dirt. Herb Sargent is a third-generation business owner and currently serves as president and CEO of Maine-based Sargent Corporation. Just a few years shy of 100 years, Sargent Company has become one of the premier heavy civil construction companies, serving more than 7 states across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. The only thing more impressive than the quality of work that you'll see from Sargent is the quality of their people. Anything built to stand the test of time starts with a solid foundation, and Sargent's foundation has been and remains today extremely strong. And they will tell you that that foundation is their people. There's way too much for us to unpack in one episode here, so we're going to go ahead and dig in and get started. Herb, welcome to the Give Us the Dirt podcast.
Oh, thank you, Brandon. I don't even know what to say with that introduction.
Was I needed to say great. A lot more.
No, it was like, now I got to live up to it.
That's right. That's right. Now you got to tell
built expectations that I thought I didn't have to reach anymore.
I think you've traveled the furthest distance to be on the podcast of any
If you knew how many miles I traveled to get here, you'd be surprised, because I've been all over North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and back to North Carolina from Maine.
And from listening to you, it wasn't the easiest of trips either. So
it's been a great trip. And, this has been my first trip down to our Mid-Atlantic office since the pandemic. And I just was so thrilled to be able to see people and shake their hands and pat them on the back. And my only lament is I couldn't talk to every single person.
You miss that.
I do.
We took it for granted for so long, and then you get the opportunity to do it again. And we need it and we miss it.
Yeah, I mean, for several years I was down in Virginia every 2 weeks. And to miss it for 2 years has really been, I missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great to see them all.
Well, look, it's great to see you, and you. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast before, but we have a unique way of introducing our guest. And instead of you introducing yourself, we want you to tell us how your wife would introduce you if she were a guest on this podcast, and we ask her about you. What would she say about you?
She would say that I'm not as good a cook as I think I am, but I do wash a hell of a dish.
Well, that's something.
Yeah, I'm bringing something to the relationship. No.
That's right.
No, we enjoy each other's company greatly, and she's a big part of my life, of course. And we talk about a lot of things, inside and outside work, and just a great partner to have in life.
Does she listen to your construction talk?
Every once in a while, she does. I guess she hit me up on it last week after we got our episode out, but I didn't realize she listened to it that often.
Well, so that's a good point. A lot of the guests that we have never been on a podcast, never even heard of a podcast, right. But you are no stranger to the podcast game. You actually have your own. Yeah,
we started one about 2.5 years ago. I think we're 125, 130 episodes deep, and it's primarily for our employees, just so we can communicate the different things in the company that are going on and challenges and changes, and we keep benefit updates on the podcast. We keep employees give each other shout outs on the podcast, different things like that. So it's a lot of fun for me to be able to communicate with our folks that way, and they can listen when they want.
And that was your idea?
I got the idea from somebody else.
Yeah. And it's working well.
I'd say so. Yeah, we have, let's say, nominally 400 people, and we get about 250 listens a week. And I think that's a lot more than would open an email, or a lot more than would open an envelope from us, because we tend to send a lot of email and mail. But so they get a chance to listen to it at their leisure, on their commute home or whatever. It's a better way for me. It's a better way to communicate, and we can do it with feeling, right? They can hear what we feel. They can, when we choke up, and we do. When we choke up on a podcast, they know it, and I think it makes a difference.
I think it's great. I think it's a great tool to be able to communicate to the team, communicate to the industry. I told you earlier when I first went to Brian here at Hoopah Grading, I said, Brian, I want to do this podcast. And I just saw this look in his eye like, what are you smoking? Right? Why in the world do we need a podcast?
Was that the first time he wondered what you were smoking?
Maybe not the first time, but he was convinced I was smoking something at that point. But I wasn't. I just thought, we need to take control of the narrative of our industry, and there's a story being told, and we're not the ones telling it.
Right.
So why not? Why not get out there and bring the Herbs, the Sargent corporations in and talk about their stories, let people hear the side of the business that made us love it.
Yeah.
And so that was the intent of it. But yeah, he thought I was crazy.
Well, I think it's turned out all right.
Yeah, it's doing good. So hey, thank you for coming.
You hit a new low today.
I don't think so. I think I'm excited about this, and we, in a little bit of research that we've done, I think our team was excited to hear the rest of your story. Herb, you guys are doing some amazing things at Sargent Corporation, so we're going to dig that out today.
All right.
I want to start with, talk to us a little bit about the timeline. And I know that's a loaded question, but go back to 1926 when the company was founded. Just kind of walk us through that timeline at a very high level of the major milestones.
So my grandfather started the business in 1926, and started it really with just a dump truck. And it's kind of the same story that you hear over and over and over in this industry. So there's nothing really special about the story except it happened to be my grandfather. That's what makes it special to me. And he got into public works. He was primarily just renting his equipment out for a while. Got into public works, became a contractor in the 1930s. Throughout the 30s, 40s, did some highway work. There wasn't a lot of commercial work in those days, in Maine was where we're from. But in the 60s and 70s, the interstate became, something's being built across the United States, and he got an opportunity to get into the highway work in pretty big shape. In the early 70s, my dad joined the company, and my uncle, Ralph, my dad's sister's husband, had joined the company. And in the 70s, my dad became president, and there was just a lot of highway work, just a ton of highway. That was what we became, as a highway contractor. And the company built or paved roughly 2/3 of the interstate in Maine, which runs kind of the whole length of the state. And then the highway work dried up, and environmental work came along, landfills, sewer, water, that sort of stuff. So we kind of pivoted into that work. And then commercial work came along in the late 90s, 2000s, and that became, the new thing. So a lot of changes. In 1988, the company was sold to a larger company from Paris, France, and that didn't go as well as the family hoped it would. So in 1991, I left and started my own business with my brother, Shane, called Sargent & Sargent, and built that business for 10 or 15 years. That was just local to Bangor, Maine. And then in 2005, had an opportunity to buy the former H.E. Sargent, my grandfather's company, which had undergone a number of, their parent company had undergone a number of acquisitions, had been acquired bigger and bigger companies, to the point where this huge German conglomerate didn't even know why they had a company in Maine. So there was an opportunity to buy it, and we did, and that became Sargent Corporation later that year, the two companies combined.
Wow. That's it.
That was 90 years I just gave you in a couple minutes.
You know what? I got a million questions on that first right now. So grandfather starts the business in 1920. He's Herb,
yes,
too, right?
Yeah.
You're named after your grandfather?
Yes.
And then your dad comes on, your uncle comes on. Why sell the business in 1988?
I think it was a matter of succession planning. Also, my dad and my uncle had interests outside the business as well. And I think that was the way that they could see forward in a family business to keep the company somewhat intact, but be able to move the ownership along. At the time, I was an employee. I was a superintendent, and there were no other family members that owned anything. So that was the way that they saw that they could move along the ownership and keep the company going.
Was there any interest on your part at that time to say, hey, I want to...
No, I mean, I was 27, I think, when they sold, or 25 maybe. So that was like way beyond anything I'd ever even considered. No.
So how long after the company sold, you and your, was it cousin?
Brother
went and started Sargent and Sargent.
So that was 1988.
So you did it
in
when the
1991.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 years.
And had a lot of success.
I had a lot of dusty times. Yeah, I joke that I've been in survival mode for the better part of 30 years, because when you go to start a business, there's no capital structure there to support it. I was 28 years old. There was no, my net worth was my 401k, so there was no massive amount of capital there to get started. So you're literally in survival mode, and a project here and a project there, and you make a little bit of money, and then you have not so good a year and lose a little bit of money, and you're right back in survival mode again, and then build it back up and have an opportunity to buy that company, Sargent, in 2005, and you go get every chip you've got and you push it in the middle of the table and you say, I'm all in. Everything you own, your car, your house, anything you own, the bank comes and gets if it doesn't go well. So you're in survival mode again in 2005, and you begin to make some money, everything goes well, and in 2008, a recession comes. So it's, still made some decent money through 8 and 9, but then through the early teen years, still in survival mode. But more recently, partially because we became an Esop, more recently we've had an opportunity to build our capital structure much more in line with something that's not survival mode. It's more, we're here, we're here for a long time, and we have the type of capital structure that we can think about things in terms of 20 and 50 year terms instead of we got to survive next year.
I love that concept that you have, and we're going to get more into that with all the initiatives and things that you're doing over at Sargent right now. We're going to talk more about that, but I am absolutely blown away. You're right. We rolled through 90 years really fast there, and I want to break that down because what's fascinating about that is here you are, 28 years old. You've gone out. Nobody's told you how to run a business. You don't know how to do this. You go out and you start a business with your brother. You grow the business. You build a business, and then you turn around and you buy the company back that your father and grandfather had sold. And it wasn't the same company that they sold, right? It was much larger at that time. Actually, much larger than the company you were running.
Absolutely. We were doing about 15 to 20 million in volume at Sargent & Sargent in 2005, and H.E. Sargent was doing about 120 million. So it was a much bigger operation. They had about 450 employees, and I had about 100. And I had a few people come to me and say, this ended up the way it should have. Don't you wish that they had never sold the business and you just, it had just stayed in the family? And my answer to that surprised a lot of people. And I said, no. If I had 1,000 opportunities to do it again, I'd do it this way 999 times, because the lessons that I learned, the education I got leaving as a 28-year-old to start a business and having to procure a shovel, having to procure a rake, having to procure a rotating laser, a trench shield, that always for me was I could just call the shop and say, have this delivered, and it was always delivered. But having to go through all that, having to understand the challenges that payroll has with it when your cash flow is disrupted, understanding the bonding requirements and how steep a battle that is to keep a bonding relationship so that you can go do the work you really need to do to grow. Understanding bank rules and regulations and the different things that they put on you to stay in business. All that, hiring, firing, all these different things that I never had to do before I now had to do. And that the depth of education that I got as someone that started back with having to go buy a shovel is much more than it would have been if I'd stayed inside that larger company for my whole career. I can remember back then we needed a bond for a $10 million job. You just faxed. We used to do that. Just faxed the bond request and one showed up. When I left and started in business, there was no faxing a bond request. It was me driving down to the bonding agent and making the case why I should have this bond for this project. And, here's the financials, here's the way the cash flow runs out. And really having to make all those cases that I never would have had to make. So for me, it prepared me for much better than I would have been prepared.
Incredible. And for those that are listening that have no idea what a fax machine is, we're going to put a picture of that into the comment section of this because I'm sure my kids would be wondering what in the world that is too. I love the story there, and I love the fact that you talk about that timeline and everything that happened and say that's exactly how it needed to happen. And that because of that, you were able to get an education that prepared you to lead the company that you're leading today. And that, the other thing, not only did you get that education on the job, it wasn't a college thing.
Right.
It wasn't a degree. It was getting to work. It was putting your boots on and getting in there and understanding what's going on and learning and just getting it done.
And learning what I was missing too, because one thing I learned early on is that I did not have I didn't have any kind of controller or bookkeeper to speak of in those early years. I really struggled to find the type of person that could predictably keep my financial system so I could understand it and review it and have it timely. And I didn't realize how important that was to me. And I often refer to that as adult supervision. But frankly, it's much more than that. It's someone you can trust that has your back, that can predictably put financials together. And that person came to me in 2000, is George Thomas, and he became our CFO. Just that piece alone, I just can't describe how important that was for our company and our growth. And then shortly after George came along, I hired a guy named Tim Folster, and both of those folks had been with H.E. Sargent in the past, so I knew them well. And so George and Tim really helped us grow at Sargent & Sargent and kind of helped us put us in a position so we could buy the company that we did in 2005.
They're going to do a case study about this one day, and they're going to talk about how a young guy from Maine can turn around and purchase a company 6 times the size of the one you're running from the Germans. And
it was an interesting process, I can tell you that.
Was it a painful process?
I wouldn't say it was painful, but it was frustrating at times because as a smaller contractor now, I've got to go convince a bonding company that they should put their surety credit at risk for a much smaller contractor buying a much larger contractor with a capital structure that's not ideal for that kind of surety support. At the same time, my grandfather was 99 years old at the time, and I went and spoke with him and told him that we were looking at this. And he said, when you evaluate it based on business merits. If you evaluate it based on what you feel, then you're going to make mistakes. So make sure you stay on the business side of the ledger and not the
keep your emotions out
right.
of
Keep
it.
the emotional side.
Was he around to see you?
Yeah.
So he got to see it come back into the family. Incredible.
Yeah, it was. From one day we'd say, okay, we think we've got the bonding thing straightened around, and we're trying to run this thing on a parallel track. Right, I'm trying to continue buying the company, going through the due diligence of buying the company, while at the same trying to and making those folks understand that I can do it, but at the same time trying to get the banking and bonding relationships in place to support it. And, on one day it'd be like, yeah, the bonding company's with you, and the next day it'd be, we're not so sure.
Yeah.
And so we had to come up with a program, a way to to improve the capital structure of the business, and that way was the day we bought the company, we had a deal to sell over half the fleet and turn that to cash, which then changed our ratios to much more favorable ratios that the bonding company and the bank could live with. So they knew that was the plan. And then we started renting equipment until we owned the fleet again.
Wow. And so talk to me, and I want to get into some of the cool things that you guys are doing. But before we do that, talk to me about the ESOP. So when did you guys, you've sold the company back to the employees?
Yes. Yeah, so even before, I think it was in 2003, we were looking at maybe we can buy H.E. Sargent, and what does that mean? And so for me, it meant this turns into something for me financially, frankly, but someday I've got to get out of it. And I have two wonderful children who have dreams outside the construction business that I respect greatly, and I knew that they did not want to be part of the company. So if I go take this on and it works out, what do I do? So 2005, we make the deal, it happens. 2007, 8, I mean, even before that, I'm thinking, what do we do? How do I get out at some point in time? And so I just started talking Esop, had a few meetings. So Esop's employee stock ownership plan. Had a few meetings with some people that came up with plans that seemed to be more about me than they were about the company. And then eventually I'm in a peer group with a company called FMI, and got in that peer group, and one of those companies was a ESOP. And so he really opened his arms, and his name's Keith Bennett, really opened his arms and to show me around, invited us over to talk to his people, and eventually, within a year or two, I made the decision, and May 1st, 2013 was our first day as an employee stock owned company.
So how many employees you have?
About 400.
There's 400 employees, and 399 of those are owners.
Correct.
And the one person that's not is you.
Yeah, so on April 30th, I was the only owner, and everybody else was an employee. And on May 1st, it was the other way around. Everybody else is an owner, and I'm the only employee.
That's a different perspective.
It is, but it was really done. I was 50 years old at the time, and I really wanted to get the ownership transition taken care of. Really any company, there's ownership and management succession. So trying to get the ownership taken care of and build stability in the company with stability around the management structure really was important for me. So I could do that at 50 and still continue to manage the company the same way we had. So there was no really disruptions in our operations, our management, our culture, our management style. So, that was the important thing about doing it back then. And also I wanted, while I still had time in my career, to be able to see the buildup of value on behalf of our employees.
And I think that's the part that I am just intrigued by. Like, this was not a way out for you. This was not, all right, how do I get out of this? How do I sail off into the sunset with my paycheck and cash out and do this? This was actually the best way that you knew to fulfill the purpose, which I read on your website. It says to build and be faithful stewards of the Sargent legacy and the resources entrusted to us. And this was the best way that you could figure out how to do that, how to maintain that legacy and be good stewards.
Yeah, that purpose wasn't written at the time, but for me, it checked off a lot of boxes. It kept us so that we could maintain a stable management structure. It began to build value for employees. It doesn't guarantee perpetuity of the company, but it certainly, I guess, places the odds on us. The tax structure of an ESOP is very favorable compared to an S Corp or a C Corp. And we had been through the buyout before. We'd been through being acquired, and I didn't see that as an option that I wanted to look at. So this checked off so many boxes. It built financial stability. It built value for employees. It kept the management in place. and it kept our culture and our name. We didn't have to worry about that.
That's a great idea.
And it was a way, you mentioned, I didn't look at this as a way in, a way out for me. I looked at it as a way in for everybody else.
Well, and I've noticed that about you. You and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the last 6 months or so. We've been talking back and forth and sharing best practices and just talking about.
I really appreciated that too, by the way.
Well, and likewise, because we've been taking notes as fast as we could, and you've got this way, and I'm sure the people listening that have spent time with you have witnessed this firsthand, but you have a tendency to drop little nuggets of wisdom along the way, and I'm listening for those, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
You have to listen hard for them sometimes.
I got to write that down. I got to get that one, and it's really cool to see that. But what I've also seen out of you is that you are just as passionate about this industry and that company and your employees today as I imagine you were when you started back in 28 years old.
Yeah, I'd say, seeing the value accrete to employees has been something that's rewarded me way beyond anything I've done in my career, way beyond any project I've ever built, way beyond any profit level we've ever seen. Just seeing this value accrete to employees and see their accounts grow in a way that really means something. And a few years, when I started it, I said, this is not going to be your retirement. This may augment your retirement. So you need to stick with your 401k. You need to stick with your financial planning. This will be your bass boat. This will be your fifth wheel trailer. And not this past year, but the year before, May of 2021, I got a text after our statements went out, our Esop statements went out, and I got a text from one of our guys, and he said, whoa, I'm going to need a bigger boat, which was super cool for me to hear that,
Give me an example of someone that started off in Esop and it had nothing, what it looks like today. Give me an example.
It ranges anywhere from $60,000 to $70,000 to $100,000 plus right now.
That someone is vested in with the employee stock program.
Yep. So most people at that level would be fully vested. Yes.
And that's after how many years?
8 years.
8 years, anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 of money that they've put not one dime into.
No, it's such an amazing concept that a company can trade ownership and not cost anybody anything up front. And it builds value literally for employees out of thin air. It's almost like you wonder if it's legal, but it is. It's perfectly legal. It's highly regulated by the Department of Labor. It's an ERISA type retirement plan. So it's very highly regulated, and it's just really an amazing way for a company to look ahead, depending on what is there for management succession and ownership succession, to look ahead and say, we can put this value in these employees' hands.
Any business owner, their dream is that all of their team members and their employees would look at the company as if they owned it. Yeah. And that they would treat it the way. Well, yours actually do own it. They're owners of the company. Have you seen that translate? Just that mentality and that perspective that, hey, I work at Sargent, but I'm also an owner. Have you seen that translate into productivity, to retention, employee retention, to recruiting? Has it helped you in those areas?
I would say we're really just starting to get traction. The early years of an ESOP don't show a lot of value for employees, typically, and ours is that way. So now 6 or 8 years in, 9 years in, it's really beginning to show value to them, and they're beginning to see that, wow. And we had a valuation company on our podcast to explain what it means to be an owner, and he said basically, if you save $1 or make $1 profit, that adds $6 to the value of the company. So that's not to the stock price, but to the overall value of the company. So if an employee pulls a 4-part chain out of a ditch and saves it, that costs $200, there's $1,200 he just saved. if he finds a different way to set a pipe or to pull a trench box or whatever that saves $1,000, he just added $6,000 to the value of the company. Understanding that they own, a sliver of every piece of equipment, every haul truck, every excavator, every bulldozer, every front end loader, every pipe laser, every shovel, every trench box, that is theirs to care for and to make sure it goes home just as safe as they do at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. That its value is not at risk, because when that piece of equipment's value is at risk, so isn't their own value.
Right. I love that. What a great program. I'm sure that's been successful for you, and I'm sure it has totally changed the game and your culture there at the company.
It's a real. We've always had a strong culture, but I feel like really the last 3 years, as people's have been allocated more shares and the stock price has gone up, then they've seen their value build, their overall value. It's really helped to make them understand that, like, if you and I are working on a crew together, Brandon, I have some influence over your trajectory. And understand that puts me in a leadership role. And you have an influence over my trajectory. And so now you're in a leadership role. And so we're all, every single one of us has an influence over the other's trajectory, at least in a financial sense, and hopefully probably in a cultural and a personal sense too, in terms of the way we invest in each other as co-employees. So I think that part of it is we've really tried to highlight that bringing value to each other is just another way to just, it's a rising tide that floats all boats.
Yeah, and doing that, you eliminate competing goals. You eliminate that person who's motivated by the sales versus this person that's motivated by the production, and you bring them together with a common goal of profitability for the company.
And this person is motivated by safety. We stopped talking productivity 3-4 years ago. We said, okay, we're not going to talk about productivity anymore. We're going to talk about execution. Mm-hmm. Because execution, to me, is more dimensional than productivity. Productivity is just how many widgets did you move in what period of time. Execution requires us to consider productivity, but equally requires us to consider quality and safety as well. So we talk execution all the time. And really that's what we're doing, is we're executing work out there in a way that our owners appreciate what we're doing, that our employee owners' families appreciate that we send them home every day, and that our financial partners, and in fact our employee owners who are financial partners with the company, appreciate that the productivity is there to deliver financial results.
Incredible. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about. Tell me about construction in Maine. What is it like to do construction in Maine? I'm sure it looks a little bit different than it does here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Well, they say summer in Maine is 2 weeks of dangerous ice skating. So it is different than North Carolina, I can guarantee you that. Construction in Maine, we have varying topographies around Maine. Some areas are kind of flat, kind of like North Carolina too. Some very hilly areas, a lot of rock here and there. The coast is all rock, almost all rock. Construction in Maine is in the whole state of Maine. We have 1.2 million people. How many people in Charlotte?
Oh, probably 1 million.
Yeah,
5.
Yeah. So in this area, you've got almost as many as we've got in the whole state of Maine or more. So we're spread out. We have a lot of needs in the state, a lot of infrastructure needs, a lot of various industries have gone away. Paper has not completely gone away, but largely gone away. But there's a lot of infrastructure needs in Maine. It can be a tough place to work, but we travel across the whole state, and we're about the only contractor in Maine that does that. That's both a curse and a blessing at times, because our folks have to travel more than we'd like them to. But it's a blessing sometimes, because a lot of the projects we get on are very rural, very remote, and that really helps build camaraderie inside our teams. Everybody's together at night after work, and staying in the same places, And, so there's a lot of camaraderie that's built that way. Our season typically runs mid-April to, let's say, December 1st, our construction season. We do have projects on occasion that we can work through the winter. The last couple of years have been pretty strong winter projects. So we can keep going, but it's in the wintertime for us is the time. I wouldn't say we relax. I'd say we recharge, and we begin to train again, and we begin to, in a way, raise people's aspirations on where they want to be and what they want to do, and try to move people ahead into roles where we know we're going to need them if we're going to grow.
Mm. So how long is that season, that winter season where you're not able to go out and do the work?
It can be mid-December to, let's say, mid-March, but probably more optimally mid-April.
Right.
Mid-March is what we call mud season. It's so the whole ground freezes, right, as much as 4 feet deep. And it's as hard as ripping rock. So we have to wait for that to come out. But when it comes out, if you put a cup of mud in the freezer and let it freeze and took it out and let it thaw, it would still be mud. Or even if you took just regular dirt and put it in there and let it freeze, it'd be mud. So the water, the snowpack coming off, and the water content in that dirt is just so high, it's really difficult to work. So really mid-April, May 1st is a more ideal time to start moving dirt in Maine.
Wow.
Maine, New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's much different than
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned something there too that one of the things I've learned about you over the last few months as we've been talking is that, and I don't want to put any dates on you here, but let's just say that is it fair to say you're closer to the end of your career than you are the beginning? Is that safe?
I've got less tomorrows than I have yesterday.
Okay,
yes.
All right, let's say that. But what I love about you is you have not let your foot off the gas. You're still rolling. And matter of fact, it's not, I talked about these nuggets of wisdom that you drop out there and people are just soaking it up, trying to capture all that. You're not just dropping wisdom, you're out seeking wisdom. You've been running around all over the place trying to figure out how do we become better? What can we do that we're not doing already? And you're constantly seeking out new ways and better ways to do things. You've started Academy yourself, right? Tell us about the Academy and what your plans are for that.
So the Academy started in 2016, and our philosophy around it was we don't need to hire 100 people, but we're an old company. We have people that have been with the company for 30, 40, 50 years. So we're an old company, and we've got, a lot of folks that want to retire, and we need to begin to replace those people, but I don't need 100. We're not going to retire 100 this year. I need to start bringing in 10, 15, 20 a year. And so we started Sargent Construction Academy in 2016. It was a 6-week school where we brought them into classroom. We exposed them to heavy equipment operation, small equipment operation, some basic blueprint reading, personal finance, retirement planning, what it's like to work a day in construction. We put them up at a local university in a dormitory, and they gave them breakfast and lunch every day, and we had them bused to our place at 6 a.m. So these are kids that graduated on Saturday and they start on Monday, and now they're adults. And so we're introducing them to what it's like to be in the construction world. And in a given day, we may say, oh, shoot, we just broke a water line, so we're going to work till 8 o'clock tonight. And they may not be prepared for that the first time, but now they got to know that someday, and we don't know when it's going to be, we're going to break another water line. So maybe having a little extra food in their lunchbox for something like that. It's really all-encompassing, and we're trying to populate the future of our company with young, hardworking individuals that will eventually be foremen, superintendents, operators, truck drivers, some laborers, but really an opportunity to get into this industry without any college debt, with a good chance to earn a salary the first year out, and begin to learn what hard work and success and and camaraderie and teamsmanship means in the context of being outdoors and achieving society's goals, right? I mean, we don't dream them up. Society says, here's what I want, and then we go build them. And what we're trying to do is leverage the money that's being spent on infrastructure to build people. That's where we're trying to head with this. Is we're building people, and you mentioned our purpose is to build, and we're looking at more like we're building people that then go build the things that society needs. And that may sound like we're cheating somebody when we do that, right? We're not taking Maine DOT's money and spending it there. We're spending it there first, and then taking MDOT's money while we build their projects for them.
Maine needs to be thanking you for spending their money that way. And that's exactly what we all need to be doing. That's what's missing, is that investment in the people and understanding that the work doesn't happen without the people.
Right.
And I love how and this is, I know you're a very humble guy, and I can tell everyone that's listening that you have given all the credit to your team. And
they deserve it all.
And as I've talked to you, you've been reluctant to take in credit for it, but it is your vision. And you've been a visionary through this, and understanding that it's more than just giving people job skills. It's giving them life skills and teaching them about personal finances, teaching them about time value of money and these types of things. That takes vision, because there's no immediate ROI on that. Right. It takes, what you talk about is looking at the business in 100-year increments.
Yeah. And not, being out of survival mode. First of all, thank you for the compliment. I mean, I do spend a lot of time. So many things I come up with aren't, they're not like ideas that are mine, but I pick them up from somewhere else and say, okay, we can maybe combine 2 or 3 things and make this happen. But having that opportunity, that freedom to be able to get out of survival mode and into development mode and growth mode that's a rewarding thing for me. And I joked to you and Katie earlier that I was in survival mode for 25 years. And frankly, that's true. And this is an unusual place for me to be in this mode where we can think in terms of 10, 20, 50-year terms. And it's enjoyable to have that freedom but it's also so rewarding, because what it means is we can do things for people that we couldn't have done before. Mm-hmm. We can do things with people. We can do things in people that we weren't able to do before.
Is that what's made Sargent so successful? Do you think that's the secret sauce?
You've got the purpose and values in front of you. And what we did is we sat down and we said, okay, this is the way the company started. It started with a dump truck that didn't even have a windshield. It started, then moved on to a cable shovel. Then it went to, some larger cable shovels, and then that was maybe some airport work that was around, and then highway work came around, and scrapers came in, and then the highway work kind of moved out, and more environmental work came in, and hydraulic excavators and haul trucks, and the scrapers went away, and then commercial work came in, and GPS comes in. And now in 2015, let's say, what we build and what we build it with bears very little resemblance to what was built and what it was built with in 1926. I mean, really the only same thing is there's people and there's ground engaging tools. That's like the only 2 things that are the same. But we've been around now for 90 plus years, and what hasn't changed that kept us around for all that period? And it took some soul searching, this purpose and values. I think we knew what they were, but rendering them down into an expression of confidence in our past and our future was a much longer process than I expected it to be. It took us about 5 months of not constant meetings, but meeting every 3 weeks or so to get that purpose and values fleshed out. And we just feel like it represents us. There's some aspiration to that. We're not perfect, so there's somewhat aspirational, but we want that to describe who we are going forward.
Yeah, and for those that are listening and are hearing this and are like me and in all of the success that you've had and what you've been able to accomplish, if you are looking for the recipe, I'm going to give it to you right now. So those values that Herb is talking about, investing in people, honoring our craft, doing the right thing, and winning in the field. That's the recipe.
Yeah. That's the way we see it. You know, maybe there's one that could be added. We've had them looked at a couple times since we did that. That was 2018. We've had a couple people have made some recommendations to us, but we held the line pretty hard on that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of elevated conversations that went in that. And when I say elevated conversations, this was a strategic planning process we went through in 2018. And the thing I loved about that is people's decibel level elevated in conversations, but the passion went with it. And the thought processes, the thinking was higher than the decibel level. Almost always. And so the heart and the passion and the teamsmanship that went into that, the understanding of looking back of all the people that came before us that built all these things that we drive on now, or land on, or put trash in, or flush the toilet into, or all these things that we do now, that those folks built before us, is something we really want to take and build on and go forward with. And I keep saying how rewarding it is. It's rewarding to have been in a room with those people whose name was not Sargent and insisted that the Sargent name got put in that purpose. It was not me. I was not going to say that, but so many of them did. And it meant a lot to me. And to me, it meant my family, going back, my grandfather, my father, my uncle, all the people that they had with them could look back and say, yeah, they honor what we did.
That's got to make you proud.
Yeah.
It's got to make you proud. And we got a few minutes left. This is the part where we ask you to give us the dirt, right? You spent the first part of this episode talking about history, talking about the last 95 years. Talk to us about the future of Sargent. What does it look like 5, 10, 20 years from now?
We've got it described pretty vividly. We believe the future of the company is people. And our future, the way we want to address the future with people, is that we want them to be full round people. We want them to have significant margins of safety in their life, in all areas of their life, in their financial life, in their physical life, their health, in their professional life, in their personal lives. We want them to understand that if they can be intentional about making deposits in those areas of their lives, whether it's a deposit with your wife or husband, or a deposit in your health, a deposit in your 401k plan, a deposit in your own investment, in your own future, that if they can build some margins of safety in all those areas in their lives, a problem comes along and it stays a problem and it doesn't become a crisis. And I guess that's the piece that I want to drive home to people, is we all have problems. It's some people begin to build that margin of safety so a problem stays a problem and something you deal with versus a crisis that you're taken under by. So a big piece of that is around that, and being what we feel is an employer of choice, and that really respects the efforts that people put in over time, so that when they decide to retire, they retire with a surplus of dignity. There's no undignified retirement, is what we hope. We see a company that needs to grow, we want to grow, and intend to grow, and that we want to take, we want to look at opportunities, we want to be fearless in the face of opportunities, but also we want to respect what we're getting into. So that's, I guess, a number of the things that describe in our processes where we want to go. But it's so much centered around people.
Yeah. And, it's that right there sums it up perfectly. I ask you, tell me what the company looks like in 5, 10, 20 years. And you spent the whole answer talking about the people.
Yeah.
It wasn't a revenue number. It wasn't an EBITDA number. It wasn't a size. It wasn't a new location or offices across the country. It was, we're going to have better people. They're going to be healthier. They're going to be more prosperous. They're going to have the tools and resources to achieve their goals.
Yeah.
That was the answer.
So as part of that, though, we do have the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
And that does have a financial number attached to it. But we talked about it, and we all agreed that financial number should not be a revenue number or an EBITDA number. It should be, here's what our company's worth today. Here's what we want it to be worth in X years, in 20 years. And the reason for that is when you pick a revenue goal of where you want to be, we believe that can lead you to make decisions that are counter to the value goal. An example is a company is, say, a $500 million company, and they say we want to be $2 billion by 2040. It begins to drive acquisition of work that may not necessarily bring value to the company because you're chasing the top line revenue. Mm-hmm. If you chase an EBITDA, you may get an EBITDA that doesn't necessarily bring value, future value to the company. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you do work in a way that subordinates your values for the sake of EBITDA, then that's probably not going to accrete to the overall long-term value of your company.
Right.
You may get a short-term win now, but a long-term lose. So
yeah, and that goes back to you talking about how you're looking at the company today in 20 years and 30 years. You're still having that long-term vision of it. It's easy to manage a company towards a number, right, and to make that number look good, but at the sacrifice of what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, we don't want to sacrifice. We could stop all spending on personnel development mm-hmm. today, and we could improve our EBITDA next year pretty significantly. But where are we in 5 years?
Right. So
this goes back to, I'll say, one of the big mistakes I've made in my career is in 2010-11, I was in survival mode. Now, we weren't in danger of going out of business next year or the year after, but we were in a situation where we needed to watch closely our overhead and watch closely what we took on for costs that didn't go earn money. So we stayed out of the draft. I mean, you use a sports analogy. I stayed out of the draft for 4 or 5 years. And you take any NFL team or NBA team or NHL team, MLB team, if they stay out of the draft for 4 or 5 years, they're going to be okay maybe in year 5, maybe year 6, but year 7 and 8 and 9, you're going to lose, right? Yeah. So I want to make sure we never stay out of the draft again. I want to make sure we are in a position financially to be able to say that cost is not going to cripple us. That cost is just something to get us to 2030.
Right. Herb, last question. What does the future look like for you? We know you've got your goals and you've still got some things that you want to accomplish here at Sargent. What's next for Herb Sargent?
I haven't spent enough time thinking about that, to be honest with you, but I'm really passionate about this Esop thing, and I have a lot of people call me about what employee stock ownership looks like and how it happens. And I'm never going to be a technical Esop guru. I'm never going to know the details, the financial and the legal details around it. But I believe that I can show people what it means and what it can mean to their companies if they decide that that's something they want to look at. And so I'm just going to answer the phone when people call.
I love that.
You know, it's an enjoyable thing for me. You know, I had one guy that called me a month and a half ago, you know, and I don't know him at all. We're connections on LinkedIn, but he has to get together. And he's a small company, 5 or 6 people. And, you know, he said he felt drawn to being in Esop. And, you know, I don't want to give people direct advice, but I think he's too small a company at this point in time, and he's very young, and I don't think his company would get the return he thinks he needs. So, I think he needs to build that company for another 10 years. But there's a lot of different people out there, and I've had a lot of people call me. And for me, I guess I'm more about the practical aspects of ESOPs and construction companies, more specifically dirt companies, I guess, and what it can do for employees, more so than I am about the financial and the legal aspects of it.
Yeah. Again, another great answer. I asked you about the future for you. It wasn't, I'm going to go join a country club. I'm going to get on a boat. It's, I'm going to keep coaching. I'm going to keep helping. I'm going to keep talking to folks, and I want to be involved, and I want to help people.
Well, there's a lot of reward to that, right? I mean, that when you have an opportunity to impact one person, even if it's an employee at work, you're likely impacting his family, his or her family, maybe across generations, maybe just in their immediate family. But the multiplier effect of being able to help folks, not so much in a one-time transactional way, but in a way that makes them understand principles and how they apply to life and to different aspects, so that same thing, and I've learned this. I've got a coach that's half my age, by the way. Alex Judd is his name. And, to be able to solve problems according to principles gives you the answer for so many more problems, rather than just solving a problem for what you need today.
You've got a coach that's 30 years old?
I do.
Again, your quest for knowledge and to become better, even personally, is inspiring. That's really cool. And I think that goes back. We don't have time to get into it, but you've been mentored along the way. You've had folks in your life that have walked alongside of you and helped you get to where you are. You've done that for others, and you want to continue doing that for others. But you've got people today that you're still learning from. I mean, you came in here today with a notebook and taking notes, asking us, all right, what's working? What can we take away to be better? So I admire that. I want you to know that I wish I knew that. I said this at the beginning of the podcast, that there's way too much here for us to dig out in an hour podcast, but
that just shows how old I am.
No, look, just some of the nuggets of wisdom that I referred to that I've written down here. You want to help people in a way that their problems stay a problem and they don't become a crisis. I think that's great. There's some great wisdom there, that so many things that don't have to become crisis would turn into crisis because we don't know how to handle them. And
a flat tire is a flat tire unless you don't have your jack, right? Then it's a crisis.
There's another one.
Yeah.
That's another page. You have success standards for all your positions, and I thought that was really cool. That what does success look like for a laborer? What does success look like for an equipment operator? That foreman, superintendent. I love that you guys are doing that. The fact that you are still seeking knowledge and on a quest for learning. Your 30-year-old coach that you have, I think, is another thing you said earlier, is that as you're training people, your goal is not to just train them for the role that you're asking them to do. You're training them halfway into the role that the next role.
That's our hope. Yeah, is we can train them halfway into the next role, because I know when it happened to me when I was in my 20s, I got tapped on the shoulder. I was putting in a run of sewer pipe somewhere. I got tapped on the shoulder, and it was, okay, you're going to go run this job now. And a month later, it's like, how come you don't have these reports in? Well, I didn't even know there were reports.
I didn't know.
Right? So we're trying to make people, we're trying to train people up that next step, or halfway into that next step. So at least they're aware of what the role requires. And when they get to that role, we've got people there to coach them further.
Well, hats off to you and your team for what you guys have done. It's an incredible story, and one that's nowhere close to being over.
No.
You guys are still, the trajectory is straight up. So
well, that's what we're hoping.
We're inspired, and we're honored to be collaborating with you and to talking about how we can make this industry better together. Look forward to working with you more. And Herb, thank you so much for making the trip down and hanging out with us on the Give Us the Dirt podcast.
Thank you, Brandon. I just want to say, after I've spent some time with you and with Katie and looking around, meeting some of your people, the pride that shows through this company is obvious. And your people, this is something that they can really be proud of. And I know Hoopaw has a great name out there in the world, and just being able to represent this brand, to me, would be a gift.
Well, thank you so much. It means a lot, and I know that means a lot to our folks that are listening to this podcast too. We've got an incredible team here, but it all starts with leadership and vision, and Brian has been able to give that to us, and it's been contagious, and we love it. We love being a part of it, and I know your employees feel the same and will feel even more that way after they listen to this episode. So thank you so much again for coming and hanging out with us. I want to get up there and see your academy when it's ready too. So let me know.
Going, yeah.
Let me know when that happens, and I'll come up, we'll eat lobster and hang out.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you for listening to this episode of Give Us the Dirt. Our podcast is powered by Hoopaw Grading Company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and produced by Well Run Media and Marketing. Visit our website at giveusthedirtpodcast.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Google so you never miss an episode.